If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
A warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. Just going to give you a brief introduction here, and then we're going to dive into a really nice, 22, 23-minute conversation with one of our good friends, Justin Perri. He does such great work over at Chalk Value Bets. This podcast is now dedicated to getting you set for making money opening night. All the conference previews, with having done the Big 10 and the Big 12 conference previews the previous 2 nights, those are all now done, all taken care of. So now it's all about turning it forward and getting you guys set. And if you are on my Twitter/X feed at @GNR_D1, I did post up the link to all 31 of the conference previews because they are a little bit scattered, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, whether you're listening on Spotify, what have you. All these conference previews, they are there. They are all uploaded. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a hub there, but every one of these, they are all squared away. And I'll be putting probably a link within the next day or two to that Twitter/X post. So that way you guys have all of those links at your fingertips. So if you want to listen back to the Atlantic Sun, what have you, you're able to do so. But now it's all about trying to be able to have some strategy, just be able to know these teams a little bit more, know sort of the tendencies and some of the things that you do want to be taken into account with your night one handicap, and some of the things that you do not want to as well. And Justin Perri, who does such great work over at Chalk Value Bets, he's going to be explaining a lot of this. We're going to be talking about guys that were either super hot or super cold from three-point range the previous year. What leads into that? Can some of these guys be all bounce back / will some of these guys be regressing? How does he really rank these teams prior to the start of the season? How does he make adjustments? How does he try to be able to grade out some of these teams who are a few teams that he's feeling bullish / bearish on as well? And just taking a look at these teams that maybe in the first game or two, they're either super duper hot, super duper cold, and finding value there as well. So this is going to be a nice wide-ranging conversation with Justin. Typically, segment number 1 is reserved for the news and notes of college basketball, and even though I did conference previews each of the last 2 nights, really didn't have too many. So now this is a podcast that's pretty much dedicated to answering all of your questions and getting you set for the upcoming college basketball season, as we're now 22 short days away from the start of the college basketball season. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you, for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. By the way, in some cases 23 days away, but that said, first one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GN_D1. Keep in mind, letters name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'll be bringing on guests that give different angles all throughout the rest of the offseason to be able to get you guys all squared away. And hopefully, this can be a podcast that makes you as much money as humanly possible. So please let me know what you want to hear the next few weeks, so that way we can get that all squared away. As now these conference previews are done, and now we can look forward to what is going to be a tremendous season. And much like last year, I will have the spreadsheet link in the show notes / wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, what have you, in the information section as well. Don't have that quite yet because we still do have 3 weeks to be able to handicap these lines. There's nobody that has posted up any opening night lines, so we're going to take a little bit of time to make sure that I don't post out there, oh, insert team here is a 10-point favorite. Then lo and behold, half the team was on the roller coaster and broke every bone in their body, like the dodgeball thing as well. So you don't want to be doing that, but at the same time, that'll be in there as well. So it's going to be very much structured the very same as last year. And we always have the structure of having great guests aboard. Justin Perri is one of those, and you're going to be hearing him on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as Shot Quality Bets has been doing a great job looking at all forms of basketball, but we know that they shine best when it comes to college basketball, including the park picks of Justin Perri. Before walking bets were cool, Justin Perri was doing a great job there. He's over there at Shot Quality Bets. He does amazing work at Action Network, does great work over at Pitcher List. I know that he's also got the Justin Perri Show as well, which you're able to find all of that work and so much more on his Twitter/X feed at his first and last name, Justin Perri. That last name is spelled Perri, the number 8 all together. And Justin, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Greg, thank you so much for having me on the show. Excited to have college basketball right around the corner. Best time of the year to be a sports fan with all the activities we have going on. NBA's come back soon. We got the World Series around the corner. NFL's in full swing. NHL is back. And of course, our beloved college basketball just a little over 3 weeks away. I'm so excited for our first 100-game slate of the season. I can hardly wait.
Oh, me too. That sports equinox is coming sooner rather than later. And Justin, there are many people like ourselves that are starved for college basketball. And right now, a lot of people are locked into what they're getting out of media days, what have you. And I want to get your thoughts here. Is there anything of value that you can take away from these preseason media polls, these media days, what have you? Or in your opinion, is it just a lot of fodder and a lot of fluff that we're getting?
I like to pay attention to them in the sense that I think they have a little bit of influence in terms of how markets are shaped, right? Like these are not, I guess, noise. I do think they do have some respect in terms of, the general consensus. And usually I find them to be wrong. It's hard. It's hard to predict how things are truly going to turn out, and there's easy things to miss in terms of the perception of how teams have changed in the off seasons. And I think asking coaches who have to spend so much time from literally the minute their postseason endeavors end to like now recruiting, prepping for their own year, do they really have the time to tell you like, oh, well, this team's actually going to have a great season and I'm super aware of all the movements they've made? I honestly think they best become acquainted with their rivals, changes when they're preparing to play them. There might be some studying of the conference and all the moves there, but in terms of how well these coaches' polls are going to turn out, I tend to think that, if you can maybe find a team that's predicted to go 5th, that's made some good moves that might actually surprise some people, that's where you can really, I think, actually find some value in this stuff. I wouldn't really go chasing the team that everyone puts at the top. It's kind of like a converse type of relationship with the market.
Yeah, and if a coach knows more about another team than he does his own team, then that might be a little bit concerning because you probably want to get your own team up to stuff before you're concerned about everyone else. So, well said there. I still bring it up on this podcast like every single time around this time, and brought it up a few times the last few weeks. I'll bring it up once again. After Oregon State made that Elite Eight run in the 2021 NCAA tournament, they were picked ahead of Arizona in the preseason poll. Oregon State won 3 games. Arizona was a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. Now, I don't think we're going to get anything quite that far off, but yeah, those sorts of things sometimes happen, as we do have our good friend Justin Perri, who does such great work over at Shot Quality Bets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And you, much like myself, are doing everything that you can to get set for the upcoming season. And one of the things that I think is most difficult with every single year is just getting started. It's like when you're trying to move a big, giant, heavy object. The hardest movement that you've got is the first one. If you're trying to like roll a boulder or something like that, once you can get things rolling, then things get a little bit easier. But where do you find yourself in terms of starting points for your rankings, your power, your handicapping, what have you, for the upcoming season? Because I think that everyone's process is a little bit different, and it is always the most difficult slate to be able to take a look at opening night just because there are so many unknowns.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a fool's errand to try to say that you're, as confident in your rankings on opening night as you will be 8 days later, right? Like it gets so much more accurate the minute we start getting 2, 3, 4 games into the pocket. That's what really I think is the advantage that I personally have, is setting up that first week to adapt quickly to what's actually happening and doing so without overreacting. Like coming in, I'm not the biggest like first day type of guy. I'm not. Some people are, and I'm going to have some action. I'm going to have some pregame action, but I will most likely be sitting there betting live mostly on the first day, trying to just analyze who's actually playing good ball out there, who has the jitters, who's developing good shots, all that type of stuff. I think there's a really good shot that we get some opportunities in that sense. But in terms of like actually ranking teams going into the first day, I think it's a little bit more like clustering and tiering rather than just like being able to say, well, this team is 100%, 3 spots ahead of this team, right? So we're like, all right, it almost looks like those tier maker lists that you see online. It's like, all right, who's really like super contender? It's just creating that strength ranking. And then, trying to bring in same data from last year, home court, how well do they travel? And then adding a little bit of extra uncertainty to produce a final number.
Yeah, but I think that that's so good what you say there, because there are some people that they've got like their power rankings where it's like, oh, if these two teams match up on a neutral court, it's going to be a 4-point line. And I do think that it's the old boxing mentality of matchups make fights. Like I take a look at a team like an Abilene Christian, a Stephen F. Austin, those teams that they look to generate a whole bunch of turnovers. And I give them a little bit more credence towards the beginning part of the season, because a lot of the teams that are facing off against them are just very unfamiliar with that style. I don't know how much you take a look at things like that towards the beginning part of the season, but I do think that when you have a team that plays a funky style that isn't so much of a, and I air quotes, your traditional team, that can pose for a little bit of a matchup nightmare, and that causes more, shall we say, volatility, and that causes for a little bit more variance in terms of the final score.
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's just so much extra volatility the early few days, and you want to kind of peel it back a little bit and understand that, right? Like, you see a team have a hot night. I'm not like jumping in and saying, oh, this is the team that, I think is winning the championship. You don't know how teams are going to start the year off defensively. There's so many ups and downs that like just having one data point, obviously you don't have anything close to a whole picture at all. You have a dot, right? And so like good luck betting with dots, good luck betting without anything at all. And there's definitely ways that you can attack the market on those first nights before teams have played and go against the grain of the market to find value on teams that maybe are having a good old FAU last season type of bump that is undeserved because of how lucky and fortunate and hot they were during a single elimination tournament. And, I don't know who that's going to be this year. I mean, I don't know if people are really going to sit there and be like, okay, well, I'm going to trust NC State to be that team again. I don't know, maybe, but it's not going to be this to the same level. For me, it's about having like confidence in terms of what you can figure out, which I guess early season is definitely, I think, futures, right? Like this is where if you do play futures and you are into the practice of tying up your funds for the season, I like to play my futures offshore, so a traditional bookie, so that it doesn't actually have to come out of the account like you have some legals, because plenty of people still let you bet on credit these days. It isn't totally obsolete, which is nice, but nonetheless, I think, focus on futures, focus on things that you can zoom out on, try to go against the crazy results. If a good team has a terrible week, don't be afraid to bet on them. The market's definitely going to be, so you can sort of soak up some value in the fear and the worry. And long term, that's usually a very, very good strategy.
And I think that you lead into something so important as well. How do you take a look at a sample size and say that it's too small to make too much out of? And then what sort of a sample size you look at and you say, all right, this team actually might be really good on offense, really bad on offense? Because I think that that's one of the most difficult things to do, because we always see teams get a little bit hot, a little bit cold throughout the season. And sometimes it lingers a little bit longer / shorter than when you would typically expect. But I always do think that that's one of the hardest things, as well as to gauging when a team is good to be coming back down to earth and when a team is just really hot and is going to be staying that way.
I think that's the beautiful challenge of college basketball, right? Like that is where this game gets so much fun to analyze, because who knows? We only get 32 games usually for most teams, average. And so we don't have a lot of time. We don't get the luxury of professional sports where you have 80 basketball games in the NBA, 100 plus games, 150 plus games in the MLB. But we do have 360 teams to figure out in just 30 games. So I usually think 1 or 2 games is too small of a sample size. The minute you start to get to some 3 game look and the underlying numbers check out, I'm going to start believing a little bit. You give me a 4 game sample in college hoops, and I will give it some credit for sure. But yeah, 1 game, especially when you can quantify overperformance or underperformance on defense or like bad closeouts, usually you can figure it out, right? And when there's a rhyme to the reason, when you can sort of closely see the actual results following the pathway of the expected and predicted behavior of the process on the floor in this case, and that gives you an opportunity to say like, all right, like that makes sense how that all unfolded, right? Like this team shot really badly, they lost. Then they shot really hot and they won. I'm not going to sit there and, derive incredible observations from that. Or if they won 2 games and one was on great shooting and one was on average shooting, you need to paint the whole picture. I think the biggest thing is not to get fooled by short-term results, especially when there's so much data out there that lets you qualify what you're actually seeing. So, I use all the expected data to go in there and make sure that when a team blows someone out, it's because they developed possessions and turnovers that created a replicable game state where they would continue to do it again, not because they hit 7 of 10 threes and barely missed inside the paint and the other team was just sloppy and it was live ball turnovers. So there's so much that can happen in sports. There's so much randomness. The best way to make yourself feel good about your analysis is to be able to back it up and say if things were to happen again and again and again, you feel good about that prediction and you take it again. So it's long-winded, but at the other end of it, like you want to just make sure that you're not jumping to conclusions that aren't supported, especially when there's a difference between the actual result and maybe the expectation, right? So when someone's super hot, super cold, don't get fooled up just because you look at a box score. Plenty of people do. The market does. And you might not think so, but it definitely happens.
Oh, no doubt about it. And you lead into something that for many years on this podcast, I'm looking back and I'm saying, why have I never asked this question? But I'll spring it on you right now. It's Justin Perri does such great work over at Chalk Valley Bets. He's joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and we see it year to year, where 1 year a guy shoots like 42, 43% from three on relatively solid volume, and then the next year they shoot less than 30% from three-point range on relatively solid volume, and vice versa. Like, I'll bring up one example to the negative. Jalen Sellers, 2 years ago, shot north of 42% from three at Ball State. Last year at Central Florida, shot below 30% from three. And then Jeremy Roach last year, career about 33% three-point shooter at Duke, shot north of 42% this past season. What do you make out of players like that? They see either a massive jump or a massive decline in their three-point shooting from year to year, because I think that those are some of the toughest guys to gauge. And typically when I take a look at those guys, I typically think that what they're going to do the next year is somewhere between the outlier good and the outlier bad and trying to split the difference.
And I mean, you got to remember that everything's dynamic, right? Like nothing exists in a vacuum in sports. Like it's not like the shooting percentage just goes up and the player doesn't garner more attention defensively, right? So when you break out and all of a sudden you're that guy and you're hitting all those shots, they're not like, oh, well, we said beginning of the year he was the second option and we're just going to put the third worst defender on him because that's what we said we were going to do. It doesn't matter that he's shooting like, no, obviously there's adjustments made. And so like when a guy comes out and makes this type of big look at me type of display of shooting, you're going to get extra attention. You're going to draw the double when you try to get to your favorite spot on the floor. Teams are going to pay attention to where you like to go and where you are the most potent at shooting. And guess what? If that's your team's best shot type from your best player, smart coaches aren't going to let that happen. And so, to see a decline in a player who unexpectedly shot a great year from behind the arc is not ridiculous behavior, because they're probably getting hit with the clamps more so than they were before they were known for being a good shooter. It's a dance. And that dance creates the space on the floor for the next guy to come along and have that impressive season. And why? Well, because he's getting the spacing, because you have to go double the guy who shot 43% last year. That's how it works. Right? This isn't like the debate. Star players open the floor for other guys. Good performances create opportunities for other guys to succeed because you have to close down the people who can perform well when in single coverage, when allowed to get 3 feet of separation on the step back three. And so you have to bring that double. You have to extend the big man out a little bit, which allows the cutting floor guy to come in for the fiery dunk. Like that's what we're building. That's basketball. That's what offenses strive for. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. And that player who hit the 43% the year before is going to happily drop that shooting percentage if it means that his assist ratio and the points he's responsible for go up because he's making that pass to the slashing cutter. So welcome to basketball, right? So yeah, that's my take on it. I wouldn't be shocked to see some of the hot shooters just be targeted on defense, but that doesn't make for worse basketball, right? It can actually be a good thing.
Yep, absolutely. And it's so well said because a lot of those guys that they do see a drop in their 3-point shooting percentage, typically those assists go northward. And when the assists don't go northward, then you really do have an issue. So I think that was so well said by you. And Justin, I always have to ask you about this as well, because you are one of the best minds out there when it comes to taking a look at college basketball. As you've been doing your research, as you've been locking in for the upcoming season, have there been a few teams that have been popping out that have been catching your attention? And this could be to the positive or the negative, just teams that you take a look at and you think maybe the perception is not the reality with them.
It's always a tough one to go off of course, but I'm lucky that, you say shot quality bets. We talk about the data that we have. It makes it so easy to honestly make these bits of analysis whenever you need to. I think, looking at some of the luckiest or unluckiest teams last year, maybe teams that might not be able to replicate it. Really, Richmond was 23-10 last season in the A10. Shot quality, did not like the way they played that game. A high percent of mid-range shots, almost 25%. They had the 320th highest rim and three rate last year. SQ expected a 15-18 win rate. So I'm not really too excited about betting on a team like Richmond in the Atlantic 10. They had a very, very lucky year. I think, it's tough to find that type of luck in some of the real mid-major conferences. It's mostly you get the type of luck in the low majors. And I think, there's probably going to be a little bit of a drawback. I think the behavior on how the market hits with Purdue this season is going to be fascinating. How much of an impact Edie had is crazy, right? So what do we see in terms of people believing in them this season? Are this going to be just this complete drawback in pricing? Are you going to be able to get value by actually taking them because of how little people believe? I tend to think yes. So that's something I'm going to be watching out for. Another team that I actually think might be able to continue to overperform is Cornell. They rated 7th in rim and three rate. They took super, super smart shots all year long in the Ivy. They will be another formidable team. I think will have another good chance to maybe even go to the dance, right? They have a great shot to be in the top 4, go to the Ivy League tournament. So if you have some type of prop on a team like Cornell at a high price to make the dance, that could be a good bet there because they do some smart things on offense. And then I think the other direction, you want to talk about teams that, maybe had a hard time of it last year that maybe should have been a little bit better. I know everyone's talking about them for football right now, but Vanderbilt and the SEC actually put together a pretty good season. The only thing that they had issue with, in my opinion, was taking too many mid-range shots. If they could get a little bit more to the paint and maybe actually create some more space for those shooters in the SEC, I'm not, going to sit there and say that it's going to be an easy run there, of course, but I don't think they finished dead last. I think they could contend and be a pretty interesting, feisty home team, especially there for some conference play as we get past Christmas.
And I love the hire of Mark Byington for them as well. And it just warmed my heart to hear you say Cornell doing very smart things. It's Thank goodness, something that actually makes sense. Someone from the Ivy League being smart. So that's what we like on this podcast. And you are one of the smartest minds when it comes to college basketball, Justin. You do such great work over at Action Network, your own show, the Justin Perri Show, Shot Quality Bets, and so much more. So love to give people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Oh yeah, I mean, it is the best time of the year. Everything is starting to come together. Top Quality Bets, of course, I lead the content team and the effort over there to get the word out about what we do in college basketball, which is, of course, to analyze every single shot, to give an expected score so that you can quickly tell who's shooting well, who's not, both in-game, post-game, and then use that to, power analysis. It's what I do. If you think it, Greg, I always appreciate you saying how smart I am, but I got to give a hand to the data, which really makes it so easy to quickly understand what's going on in the game of college basketball. And that's like a superpower. And if you can do that, you can handle one of the most massive markets that even sports books have trouble handicapping 300 teams. It's just the truth. It's hard. If you can really find your niche and use data to superpower your efforts, I think it's one of the best sports to put the effort into, one of the most rewarding, and honestly, one of the most fun. So I'll be doing that all season. We have a really great show called Shot Quality Live Betcast that I host. And what we do is we just live bet for 45 minutes a couple times a week using the data. So come check it out, see what it's all about, see what everyone's super excited about. I think it's one of the most fun gambling experiences out there, watching the game, seeing who's playing well, verifying it with data, and then making the play as the game is happening.
Absolutely. And when we need a hero, we look to Justin Perri to be able to give this show a lift, and he does so every single time. So big thanks to Justin for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, naming does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. We've done all of our conference previews on this podcast, so we've got 3 weeks remaining. Let me know what you want to hear on this podcast to get you set for what is going to be the most profitable and fun college basketball season ever, as I'm with you guys every single day. Regular season, off season, it does not matter. All 366 days this year, you're getting a fresh podcast, so you'll get another tomorrow. Appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you then. Thank you.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.